Hello friends, welcome to CEC Live Lectures. Dear friends, with our ongoing series on basic sociology, today we are going to conduct 16th lecture in this series. Today we are going to talk on political sociology. In the first half, we would be talking on nature and scope of political sociology, whereas in the second half, we are going to discuss approaches and theories of political sociology. Friends, for the discussion on the topic, we have with us in our studios Dr. Archana Prasad. Dr. Archana Prasad is Assistant Professor in Department of Sociology, Kamala Nehru College, University of Delhi. Dr. Prasad is a prolific professor. She is contributing a lot in the area of academics. She has written various articles on the subject which are published in reputed journals too, and is contributing in some way or the another in the area of the academics. Friends, if you wish to ask questions from Dr. Archana Prasad on today's topic, then do call us through our toll-free number. Our number is 1800-110-430. I repeat, our number is 1800-110-430. All dear friends are requested to call in the last 10 minutes of the lecture. Now, I would like to welcome our guest, Dr. Archana Prasad, and would request her to give us a deep insight into today's session. Hello, ma'am. Welcome.
Thank you, Gitika. Welcome to the series of lectures in sociology, and today I am going to talk about political sociology. Political sociology is considered as falling in between political science and sociology, but over the periods it has developed as a distinct discipline in itself. And therefore, it is important to understand the way the discipline emerged, some of the important concepts and theories that are relevant in the understanding of political sociology, and therefore, and also how, from the very inception or the beginning of sociology as a discipline, political sociology was integral to the understanding of society, and therefore we need to look into some of the concepts which are very important to understand the relations between political structure and social relations, and that is the basic task for political sociology, to develop an understanding of the intersection between the political process, institutions, organization, and the social structure, the way relations are structured between state and society, which is the crux of the theory. So to begin with, we need to understand what is political sociology. And to understand political sociology, we can do it in two manners. One is to arrive at a grand definition. In the grand definition, we'll try to understand who gets what, when and how, that is in the sense of distribution of power. We'll see that power is the core of political sociology, and therefore the whole understanding of what people are getting resources in a network of relations, how they are getting, is integral to the discipline of political sociology. The second is what are the political outcomes of political process and how these processes affect social circumstances. For instance, class and inequality could affect the demand of welfare state, and at the same time different types of welfare state would be able to have a different system of stratification or be allocating power and status accordingly to different class and status. Then the other way of understanding political sociology is to arrive at a more informal understanding of the discipline, and in that sense it is all about people, how they relate to politics, because we need to keep in mind that political sociology is trying to understand the interrelation between society and politics. So society is represented by people and politics by state. So we need to understand how people think about politics, what policies they want, how are they impacted by these policies, what makes them participate in the political process, what makes them divide and unite in terms of the access to certain resources or denial of certain resources. Then we need to think about things that affect political preferences. Why does one group vote for one particular party and not the other? Then attitude, values, behavior of society in the large. It also needs to affect that we try to understand how we are trying to affect the policies which are being made by an institutional structure which is considered as the government, and how these the whole formulation and implementations of policies would impact people differently. Therefore, if we look into the whole tradition of sociology, and as I already said, that the understanding of the relation between state and society was integral to the discipline, as we know that the discipline emerged at the time of industrial revolution, at the time of a crisis, and there was therefore the whole focus to understand how the changes in political realm was bringing about a change in the relation between the state and society. If we can trace back the origin of political sociology to thinkers like Tocqueville, Karl Marx, Max Weber, and Durkheim, to name only a few, if we look into the way that Karl Marx and Weber, who are considered as the most founding figures in the development of the discipline, we see a kind of a difference between the two. Whereas Weber was more concerned with the modernization process, in the sense that as society was moving from traditional to a modern society, there was a change in the type of rationality, or there was a change in the type of authority from a traditional authority to a rational legal authority, and this was through the emergence of the structures of state and the bureaucracy which had control of power. Whereas for Marx, it was more an economic understanding of society, where he saw the state as creator of the capitalist class and the divide between the haves and have-nots. So it was emerging in the writings of Marx and Durkheim, but we see post World War II was a major vantage point from where it started developing into a more broader discipline because of the wider changes in the political structure, and this attracted the attentions of large number of scholars and theoreticians who were trying to understand the changing nature of political structures, institutions and government to arrive at an understanding of the relation between society and political institutions. So then next, after trying to understand the concept of what is political sociology, we try to focus on what is the subject matter of political sociology. And as I have repeatedly said, that it is trying to understand the relation between state and society in a varied ways, in different ways. Different scholars have tried to arrive at an understanding in different manners. For Koza, the various topics of study includes attention to the state and institution, organization of power, competition and ordering among groups, development and political association. Greer and Orleans says that political sociology is concerned with the structure of state, the nature and conditions of legitimacy. Legitimacy is the appropriate use or by a institutionalized use of power, and therefore it has to be understood why it is being used and for whom it is being used. The nature of monopolistic forces and its use by the state, the nature of subunits and relation with the state. So Greer and Orleans treat political sociology in terms of consensus, legitimacy, participation and representation, and relationship between economic development and political change. So we see to a large extent the focus of political sociology is try to grapple with the complexity which arises due to the change in the structures of political institutions, at the same time changes in economic relations. So if we look into the changes which are taking place in politics and economy are not taking place alone, or are not taking place in isolation, but are impacting each other, and therefore it is very important to understand that why a society is structured in such a manner is to reflect upon the political and economic changes that have taken place in the society at that point of time. So to continue with the subject matter of sociology, we see that Andrew Effiet, he says that political sociology is concerned with pattern and consequences of the distribution of power and authority in all different types of social systems. So social system could include small families, educational, religious institution. It's not only the state and the government or the parliament which is limited in terms of understanding of social system, but it's a more variant group of institutions. The next author, Lipset and Bending, says the political sociology tries to study voting behavior. We try to know a lot about the society by just looking into the voting behavior. Why a certain caste group gives vote to a certain political party. So we try to understand the caste politics nexus, or why is a particular group from one particular religious community give votes to a certain political party which would be taking forward the agenda of that community. So even to that extent, we can try to understand the nexus between religion, politics and the social structure. Then we try to understand ideologies of political movement, because political movement has been an integral part of society, and at different point of time different kinds of movements have been taking place in order to assert for the rights of the people. So we need to understand that why are these movements emerging, who are the interest groups that are participating in it, and what are the outcomes of these movements. Similarly, try to understand political parties and voluntary associations. So in the sense that any kind of an association is a collection of is a collectivity, and to a large extent collectivity has to be understood in terms of the power relation between the one group and the other group. Then we come to the next topic, which is the features of political sociology, and in here the focus is to try to understand how political sociology is distinct from political science, because if it is being concerned with politics, with government, with state, these are some of the subject matter which have been taken up by political science. So why do we need a distinct discipline or a different discipline called political sociology? The reason for this is that it does not study state or statecraft per se. So the political science would be considered only to understand the functioning of the state, the structures of the state, whereas for political sociology, they try to understand state in relation to society. So it is also not sociology of politics, because it's not only studying the political aspect, it is trying to understand the interconnection between political politics and the other aspects. The political sociologists believe that there is an identity of form in terms of the relation between the social and political process. Political sociology is more concerned with the impact of political process institutions on society. So concern is with social and its impact on political, that is of paramount importance. It tries to solve the controversy between state and society. So at one point of time, it would be considered that state and society was more or less the same, and there was a trying of understanding. And if we go back to the primitive society and we see the nature of politics was in terms of lineage, kinship and family. So the chieftain would be a hereditary member. So there was no clear-cut distinction between state and society. It was only through after the separation of the church from the state and through the process of formation of nation-state that a distinction began to be developed between state and society. And this distinction was not to keep them in two isolated units, but to try to understand the relation between and the interaction between the two. So we see the political science focuses on formal institutions and acts of governing, whereas political sociology explores politics that happens in other social settings like family, work, civic organization, etc. It understands how social relations and attributes shapes pattern of participation and distribution of power. Bottomore, Bendix and Lipset says that political science deals with effect of state on society, whereas political sociology deals with the effect of society's influence on state. Political science is concerned with how formal institutions work, whereas political sociology explores how political relations are constructed, its consequences, and change is brought about. Then we look into the whole historical context in which the discipline emerged. So as I have already said, during an ancient period, there was no distinction between state and society. For Plato and Aristotle emphasized the social underpinning of government. It is in the Middle Age that they emerged a distinction between state and church, and the state was seen as subservient to the city of God. A more dominance was given to the institution of state. State had limited jurisdiction of government to facilitate free enterprises. Locke, Adam Smith, Rousseau began to make distinction between state and society, and they tried to understand the distinction between state and society, and to a large extent to see how the state would negotiate the conflicts taking place in the society. Industrial revolution led to destruction of the feudal society and decline of the authority of church. Marx, by providing a critique of Hegel's philosophy of state, conceptualized class as the basic variable for social and political explanation. So Hegel was trying to say that the state could bring about an end to the conflict, whereas for Marx, state was actually creating a conflict in terms of creating the capitalist class. It perpetuated the capitalist class by providing the situation of favoring the emergence of a capitalist class. So it says that it could not bring about an end, or it could not resolve conflict, rather it created social conflict in terms. So the Marxian understanding is to try to understand power and force in society in terms of the economic forces, in terms of the relations to production. So he was been considered as providing the foundation of the emergence of the discipline of political sociology. And as I have already said, Weber was trying to understand political sociology by making power as the most central concept. Then we try to understand some of the main concepts which are relevant in the understanding of the nature of state and society. And the foremost concept is power. And the first thinker, or rather one of the most founding thinker to have developed an understanding power was Max Weber. He defined power as the ability to achieve one's goals over the objections of another's group. So a group could achieve what it wanted by forcing the other group not to achieve their demand. So one had the ability to achieve, while the other were not, but denying that ability. Robert Dahl had said that an aspect of relations between two social actors, where one actor A can induce or influence actor B to do something in line with A's preference when B would not do that otherwise. According to Michael Mann, there are three types of power: political power, economic power, and ideological power. Here, in the sense that if we try to look into political power, it would be the ability of those who are in the position of policy making, those who are in the position of implementing laws and regulations, whereas economy, if we try to have an understanding, would be those who are the owners of productive means of resources. And then we have ideological power, which is the group or individual whose ideas are considered as dominant, or whose idea considered to be hegemonic in nature, and therefore it would be considered as a part of ideological. Then we have Foucault's understanding of the notion of power. For Foucault, power was not substance, but it was something which was said among a few privileged people, and it was in circulation. It was like a flux or an electric energy which was constantly flowing in society. So it was not something that could only be constant with one group, and it could become that group would become owner of that power, but it could change from one instance to the other. It is not exclusively concentrated in formal institutions or state apparatus. It is ubiquitous and penetrates complex network. Power is not something that one can own. It is something that appears in action. It appears when it is implemented. So it is not something which is abstract. It is something which is felt only when it is implemented, or it is taking in power, when someone is using it for certain purposes. Power relations have to be conceived in terms of strategies, techniques, and tactics. It is mode of action on the actions of the other. So power becomes significant only when one group would use it to actually access resource or have a higher status compared to the other group. Until and unless there is a use of that power, it is not realized and it is not considered as having any existence. Politics becomes the continuance of war by other means. Then the other concept is authority. Authority is the legitimate or socially approved use of power. So it is the legitimate power which one person or a group holds over the another. According to Max Weber, there are three types of power, because he believed that legitimacy was authority was the legitimate exercise of power emerging from three sources. One is the rational legal authority, which is grounded in defined law. So it is based on a set of rules and regulations, and the people are supposed to have obedience to this law, and it is the law that makes it legitimate. Then we have legal rational authority, which is used by the government and those in authority. The second form of authority is traditional authority. As the name suggests, it emerges from the traditional sources, that is right through inheritance, through lineage. So if in the kinship-based society, the authority was traditional in the sense that chieftain would be always hereditary. So the son of a chief would become a chief and have legitimate authority exercise. Then you have charismatic authority. Charismatic authority is emerges from the personality of an individual, and that emerges from certain traits of leaders or certain qualities that makes an individual as a leader, and it's considered as an authority because the people accepts his power as legitimate, and this they are ready to agree to the conditions which the leader would put forward for them. Then the next concept that is of more very significance is the concept of state. So here we try to, there's a whole debate on the understanding of state. So we just try to bring about a very brief understanding of the four main arguments or understanding on the idea of state. So we begin with the whole idea of state with Karl Marx's understanding. For Karl Marx, the state alone with all political power is merely instrument of one class for oppressing another. As I just said, that for Marx, the state was the creator or the perpetuator of class-based inequality because it supported the emergence of or it aligned with the capitalist class. And the reason was that those who are in the state people who are in power are also people who are economically well off, that is, they are the owners of means of production, and therefore there is a connivance between the state apparatus and economic power, and therefore the power is actually used by the capital class to oppress the working class. It is one of the, so if we put in the Marxian understanding, we know that for Marx, the economy was the base, and the state culture were superstructure. So it says whatever changes happen in the economic relation would bring about a change in the political structures of the society. Then we come to Weber, and for Weber we see that he was trying to understand the emergence of bureaucracy as a form of an institution for the implementation of rational legal authority. With the emergence of modern state, with the modernization process, there was a shift from traditional authority to the legal authority, and here the state was considered as the sole right to use violence. So the state would use violence and coercion to implement its policies and regulations. Then the third thinker on state is Durkheim. In the Darwin-inspired evolutionary metaphor, society is an organism and the state is its brain, which like human brain has grown in the course of evolution. It has primarily a regulative function. We know Emile Durkheim was a functionalist, and he was trying to bring out the functionalist role of state. So the role was to keep forces of social disorder at bay, anomie, forced division of labor, the failure to replace traditional with modern norms, etc. He was trying to look into the whole idea of how state could bring about a kind of a collective solidarity among people with the shift from the simple society to a complex society. Emphasis of the extractive functions of state relating to taxes, property regulation, involvement in money economy. As the money economy expands with the industrialization, the modern state increasingly bureaucratizes. There is rationalization, centralized becoming based upon extraordinary collectivization, integration, and unification of political forces. So the whole idea is that when we try to understand state, we see that the whole focus is to understand the relation of state to the people, and in terms of what is the function of state, whether it is coercive or it is regulative, whether it is trying to bring about an end to the conflict in the society or it is trying to bring about an integrative role. These are some of the ways in which state has been conceptualized. The next concept is politics. The word politics and political refer back to the ancient Greek word polis, or city-state, implying city-state. The term politics referred simply to matter of concern to the running of polis. For Aristotle, the polis was the ideal political form that collective life took. It means that there was an ideal size for a polis. Political life was an ordered collective life for Aristotle. And the role of the state was to ensure that the moral order of the collective was maintained. The city-state was for him, therefore, the ideal form of political life in ancient Greek. Politics is the idea of freedom. People grant themselves to rule themselves. And it is not a principle of domination. It gives and take. We experience in everyday life. We come together to console. The whole idea was to ensure that how a collectivity comes together to ensure a moral collective order in society. Then we know Max Weber, he defines politics as the activity of striving to share power or striving to influence the distribution of power. In his work, Politics as Vocation, he asked, what is the meaning of political action? And that is how one would use that power to the ability to use the power to fulfill one's goals or objective. Similarly, we have the concept of government, which is a formal organization that is going to implement the legitimate authority in society, and there are different forms of government like monarchy, aristocracy, democracy, authoritarianism, totalitarianism, and then we also have the concept of elite and ruling class, where we see the society is divided into kind of a two dichotomous group, where one group is the elite, which is the minority, which has the power and which rules, whereas the ruling class are the ones who are the subordinate. So this elite and ruling class will be taken more in detail when I look into the theories or looking into it. So in the first half of the lecture, I have tried to understand the emergence of political sociology, looked into some of the concepts like power, politics and government. And in the second half, I will try to look into the theories of political sociology. Thank you.
With this note, thank you, ma'am. Thank you so very much for explaining us in detail the nature and scope of political sociology. Dear friends, there is a lot more for you in the next session, so you are requested to be with us. We are back after a short break. Thank you. Hello friends, welcome back in this part of the lecture where we are going to discuss on theories as well as approaches of political sociology, and for the discussion on the topic we have with us in our studios Dr. Archana Prasad. Friends, if you wish to ask questions from Dr. Archana Prasad on today's topic, then do call us through our toll-free number. Our toll-free number is 1-800-110-430. I repeat, our number is 1-800-110-430. Now I would like to welcome our guest Dr. Archana Prasad once again and would request her to continue further.
Thank you, Kritika. Welcome back to the second part of the lecture on political sociology. In this part of the lecture, I will try to look into some of the major theoretical ways in which political sociology has emerged and contributed to the understanding of the relation between state and society. And first, to begin with, I'll look into some of the approaches to the study of political sociology. And first approach is a historical approach. As the term would appear, it is a kind of an understanding of interaction between state and society through the understanding of the writings of Max Weber and Karl Marx. I have been repeatedly using Max Weber and Karl Marx in this lecture because they form the foundation for the understanding of political sociology. So when we try to talk about historical approach, implies we're trying to understand the interaction at different point. That is, we are trying to have a temporal and contextual understanding. The next is the comparative approach. A comparative approach will use a comparison of different political systems in two societies, and this was used by Ostrogowski and Missel in the study of political parties. So you try to understand two different political parties, or you try to understand the functioning of two different political institutions, two types of governments, and you compare and you come out with the similarities and differences. The third is traditional approach. The traditional approach focuses on legalistic and constitutional factors and political behavior. So it is trying to understand the ways in which society functions in a different kind of a society. The behavioral approach regards individuals as the basic unit of analysis and trying to understand the behavior pattern. For instance, I began with trying to understand the voting pattern of the people, of why individuals try to vote for one party than the other, the participation in political process, why what kind of policies people want. So the focus is more in trying to understanding the behavior of individual rather than understanding the social structure of the society. Then coming to the theoretical perspective, we know that it was been the foundation was laid by Max Weber, and then post World War period there was a further growth of the discipline. But we also look into the other theories which have been contributing to the discipline. The first is comparative theory, then we look into the social class theory, and a large number of theorists have provided understanding of elite theory. Then we look into pluralism, structuralism, idealism, and realism. So going back to the first is the whole idea of comparative theory was Montesquieu. He was the first Greek French philosopher who tried to initiate the understanding of the relation between political structure and the society, and therefore he trying to bring about a large number of socio-cultural variables for understanding the political institutions, or how cultural variables influence the participation of individuals in political process. He analyzes the social and economic events to bring about a linkage between the two types of events. He classified political institution into an ideal type, that is republic, aristocracy, monarchy, and autocracy. So in this view, these political institutions did not arise by as accident. There were certain social cultural settings or social cultural events which led to the emergence of one form of government, political institution, and certain inherent limitations, or there are certain social cultural changes which were taking place which led to the demise of one form and the emergence of the other form. So therefore we try to understand, we were trying to do a kind of a comparative understanding between the social and cultural processes which is giving rise to different forms of political institutions. The next thinker is Tocqueville. He wrote about the democracy in America, and he was trying to understand the reasons for the success of democratic institutions in that country. while he was trying to understand democracy, but he was not looking into only the state or the political system, but he was looking more into the non-political factors which he considered were equally important for the success of democratic system in the country. So he said it was in terms of the tradition, in terms of culture, in terms of environment, and in terms of the behavior pattern of the citizens, which was leading to the functioning of one particular form of government compared to the others. And people considered it as an ideal type compared to other forms of political institutions. He states that institutional safeguards alone cannot contribute to the success of democracy. So you are trying to understanding a political system by giving reference to the non-political factors into the understanding. Then we have the classic Marxist theory, and I have already talked about in the first half of the lecture, and let me repeat it. So when we try to understand Marxian theory, for him the society was ruled by the control of means of production. That is, the economy was the base, and the relation between individuals was a relation of means of production between haves and have-nots. So the class basics of politics is the major determinant of political phenomena. Must ask which class controls and dominates this class. It is those who have the ownership of the means of productions are the ones who are the controller of power. So the social power is flowing from the economic power, and it is transcending into a political or legitimate form of authority. Reality, he was trying to understand state as an institution which was trying to regulate the means of production in a manner that it perpetuated the formation of a small group of a capitalist class. So the society's dynamic was rooted in the economic activity, which is essentially the production of material life, food, clothing, shelter, and culture. And the process of economic activity arises out of economic activity. Foundation or the basis of society is the economy from which the legal, political, religious, cultural, educational institutions derive. Societies in different stages of development create different productive systems which are economic institutions, which in turn shape general nature of beliefs and practices in all areas of life, including political organization. So his theory was basically a form of economic determinism. Obedience of all classes was the result of not coercion or not the use of any legitimate power, but because of the dependence of the working class on the capitalist class for subsistence and a false consciousness. The power flows from economic relations. Who rules? Those who control the economic resources are those who are the ruler of political power. So political power is not centered in the state or in any other institutional form, but it is emerging out of the economic relations or in the means of production. Economic dominance is translated into power in all the other societal realms, especially the state. As dominant economic class is ruling political class. So you have a dominant economic class are those who are the owners of means of production, and it is the same dominant class that becomes the ruling political elite. Since class a political group, and because he's locating the political groups in the economic relation, so conflict is therefore a class conflict, and the class conflict is basically between those who have ownership of means of production and those who don't have. So the conflict between haves and have-nots is structured on an economic relation, which is also a relation of power, and it is a relation of power because there is a relation of dominance and subordination. Then we have Weber's theory of bureaucracy. Having arrived at the conclusion that economic power emerges from wealth and status. So for Marx, the economic power was emerging from the modes of production. For Weber, it is emerging from the status in society or the individual's position in society. He says that class relations lie at the source of power and politics. So he emphasized on the manifestation of class powers exercised through the state. assigns a quasi-autonomous role to the state in which state bureaucrats appear to be serving their own interest and bureaucracy appears to be a power unto itself. So it is a kind of a structure which emerges due to modernization, where again the political or the ruling class have appropriated power and kind of using the structures of bureaucracy for the legitimate use of power to fulfill their own needs. Bureaucracy depends on specialized and skills and experts and those who have knowledge of rational legal system of knowledge. So it is different from a traditional authority. It is not based on personal traits or values and moral ideas, but it is a kind of based on law books. So, and it is only a restricted few who would have the knowledge to implement the power of the bureaucratic system. With modernization of society and great legal rational authority, there is increasing professionalization of leadership. Power becomes concentrated in bureaucracy, which controls over human being, and they control and they have a monopoly of resources, and they have the capacity to carry out or not policies of political leaders. Bureaucracies are stable but instringent, with a remote and unanswerable bureaucratic elite, thus with citizens removed from control of input into political decision making. Question is determining who controls and directs the complex bureaucratic machine. He does not believe to be autonomous power unto itself, as Michel believes, but rather it is a tool or instrument of power. Weber argues that bureaucracy and power are manifestation of real forces that dominate in the society. The next theoretical after-class theory of Karl Marx, Weberian theory of legitimate power and authority. We have the third theoretical perspective, which is the elite theory. And as I already said in the first half of the lecture, there are two groups in the society. There is a kind of a binary division in society, in which one group, which is few in number, are those who have access to resources, and they are the ones who have power. So they have economic power, they have political power, and there is the rest smaller, the mass or the larger number of people who have denied the access to resources and power. So some call it as elite and mass, some call it as elite and the elite, the ruling class and the ruled. So then we also we have a large number of thinkers who have developed the elite theory of whether power is concentrated in the hands of few or it is being manipulated by those who are in a position of high rank and position. So two school of thoughts emerges in terms of the position of the elite in society. One is that they are the decision makers of the society. They are on the top of the hierarchy of the society, and they are taking the main decisions to regulate society. Their power is controlled by this group. The second is that they are the source of value. That is, they have access to all the resources. They have access to not only material resources but also non-material resources, and therefore they can play an integrating role in society. To look into some of the main contributors of elite theory, we have Vilfredo Pareto, whose work is The Mind and the Society. Then we have Mosca, whose work is Ruling Class, Robert Missle's Political Parties. Then we have C. Wright Mills, The Power Elite, and we have Burnham's The Managerial Revolution. Then we go into Pareto's understanding of elite. He uses the term elite and masses to indicate two groups in society. One is the superior and the other is the inferior. The elite are the superior group and the masses are the inferior group. So there is a structured hierarchy in society. He stresses on the psychological and irrational aspect of elite. That is, you have a psychological feeling of being superior. Because you have access to economic resources, you have power and position, you psychologically feel more superior than the mass. They are not the result of economic forces, nor as building the dominance of the organizational ability, but the outcome of human attribute constant through history. Elites are the highest achievers, essentially in all areas of intelligence. So he's saying that there is a certain kind of a characteristics which has been a part of the elite society, and it has remained constant in the historical understanding. So they have a higher, on the higher end, they are the achievers, they have better qualities, and they are better oriented to achieve success. There are two types of elite, the governing elite and the non-governing elite. The governing elites are those in the part of the state and political institutions, and the non-governing elite would be those who are at a high position because of access to material resources. He developed the idea of circulation of elite, that it is not a constant group, and those who are at one point of elite would be would through a process of time get replaced. So the old elite would be replaced by the new elite. Then we have Mosca. Mosca believed that all societies are divided into two groups, the ruling class and the class that is ruled. Thus argued for the universal necessity and inevitability of class rule. He stressed on sociological, organizational and personal characteristics. So unlike Pareto, which is psychological, his is more sociological. He said elites are organized minority. The ruling political class includes the ruling elite and the sub-elite, technocrats, managers, civil servants. Masses are not organized. So this is the distinction between the ruling, the elite and the mass. The elite is a more organized group, whereas the masses are unorganized. Personal characteristic includes intellectual, material, moral superiority, which is highly esteemed and very influenced in the society. So because they have a higher intellectual capacity, access to material resources, and this has helped them to achieve a higher position in society. The dominant interest of society, which are social and political forces, prevailing ideas and institutions of the time, become reflected in the ruling class, and thus they dominate the structures and value. Then we have Misel's iron law of oligarchy. For him, every organization, whatever be its origin, turns out to be an oligarchy because it is ruled by the chosen few. Most society, there are few individuals who are selected with certain specialized knowledge to become rulers, and they are entrusted with the task of having a control and regulation of the society. So this basically emerges because certain form of social organization and division of labor. Division of labor in the sense that there are certain group or individual with certain specialized knowledge who are asked to do a higher or a more specialized task. So those with more knowledge, more skills become are therefore few in number, and they are the ones who start ruling the rest of the society. Have combination of apathy, insufficient time, lack of expertise, need for guidance of the masses, and the natural greed for power of the elite. Three basic principles of elite formulation that take place within the bureaucratic structures of political organization. Number one is the need for specialized tasks, because certain tasks can be done only with specific knowledge, a certain specialized body of knowledge. Then these task has to be utilized by the leaders, or there has to be facilities for being utilized by them. And the psychological attributes or the charisma which leads to the formation of an oligarchy, where that is the rule by a selected few. Then we have C. Wright Mills' power elite theory. C. Wright Mills, he adopted an institutional approach and stated that elite must be studied in the context of the economy and social structure of particular society. Societal power rests in control of key societal institutions, cooperation, executive branch of the government. Elites are not inevitable or natural, nor that masses are incompetent, apathetic or untrustworthy. Masses are manipulated and exploited and kept in a state of ignorance, and thus powerless by elites who rule in own interest. This accounts for non-participation. So on one side, we have a theory which says that by default or by natural poor quality of intellectual capacity, the masses are left behind, and they are therefore at a lower level, and the elites are psychologically more intellectuals, have more skills, have more specialized knowledge, and therefore are able to rule the other. Here, C. Wright Mill says that it is not that it is natural, or it is taken for granted that there is a kind of a difference between the elite and masses, but it is the way in which social reality functions that has been that those who had resources, those who had power, have manipulated the resource and power to subordinate and keep the masses at a lower level so that they could continue to enjoy the monopoly and the use of power. So there is a kind of an institutional approach. Elite are from upper class and perpetuate themselves through selective recruitment and socialization of elite values. So there is a kind of a vicious circle. So if one is born into upper class who have access to economic resources, they will be able to have better education, acquiring better skills and knowledge, and therefore again be recruited into the higher position. So it leads, and they will continue to be in a higher position, and those who are in the mass are denied the resources, facilities to improve the knowledge and expertise, and therefore continue to be exploited by those who are at the upper end. Then we have Burnham's, who provided the theory of managerial revolution, and that is again trying to talk about how the society is not fixed, but there is a kind of a circulation which is taking place, and he is trying to bring about an economic approach where he says that because capitalist system is in decline and it will be replaced by a society controlled economically and politically by a managerial elite, based on the idea that politics is always a matter of struggle. So it is a struggle between the haves and have-nots, or those who have access to resources and power and those who do not have, or it's a struggle between those on a higher status and those at a lower status. This constant conflict will continue, and it will be the group that will have control over the resources and power would emerge as victorious and will be the managerial elite. Social change occurs as a result of shift in composition of the elite. The old elite is replaced by the new one. Therefore, in an industrialized society, an egalitarian society, that is the absence of class or the absence of division between the people in terms of the amount of resources or in terms of political power that they have, it would be difficult to visualize. The class-based society or unequal society is therefore inevitable in an industrialized society. Then we have pluralist theory. The pluralist theory, unlike the elitist society, says that power is dispersed, it is centralized, it is spread out, it is not concentrated in the hands of a few of them. So power pie, that is the big share of power, is not concentrated in one area but could be divided into many pieces. Society is heterogeneous, it consists of many diverse groups and association, and therefore there is a conflict and contestation over the power pie, and constant conflict and negotiation is a part of the political process, and that brings about the nature of a plural society. Society is made up of multitude of conflicting interests, group balanced by state. Groups are equally influences in the impact on government policy and major institutions. Existence of shared acceptance of basic political framework. Economic and governmental institutions are separate, not overlapping, and there is a tension between the people who have access to these resources. The two main thinkers of pluralist theory are David Trowman and W. Domhoff. David Trauman, in his work, The Governmental Process, he provided the most comprehensive and modern statement of pluralist theory. He acknowledges some level of inequality based on income and wealth, but does not look at wealth income as equitable and fair. So at one side we have those who say that it is the distinction on or the access on wealth and income is fair, but he is saying that there is something which is incorrect in it. The state is neutral, arbiter maintaining and regulating. So on one side it could be that the state has been considered to be a part of the capitalist class, but here he is saying it's a neutral condition and it is trying to regulate fair economic practices. But again, this whole understanding of whether the state is neutral or it will depend on the type of economic system or economic process in the society. Then we have Domhoff. He says that again there's this whole idea of plural heterogeneous society, and there are number of groups and number of associations which are in contesting over the power. So it is to keep in mind that power is limited and there is a large number of those who want to have access to that power. So politics basically implies the negotiation and contestation over by these diverse and heterogeneous group to have access to that pie of. So then we also have the structuralism theory of Paul Landers, who emphasized the structural principle, and he was of opinion that the state itself is capitalist in nature and therefore it cannot be an arbitrator or it cannot regulate, but it is only trying to ensure the perpetuation of a capitalist society. Then we have instrumentalist of Miliband, who was more in terms of the both of them are in terms of a Marxian understanding, where the focus is to try to understand state as a capitalist society which is trying to perpetuate the inequality in society. And we also have the realism of Machiavelli and Hoff, who says that it is end justifies the mean and might make right. So the politics is the way it is. It is autonomous, separate from moral or other non-political struggle. It is basically a struggle by the nation state in order to have access to power, and the belief that absolute power of the state, single-minded pursuit of national security and interest is more diverse. So therefore it is trying to arrive at a more complex understanding of the nation relation between politics, power and state. So with this I come to an end of the lecture on political sociology, and have tried to actually bring about a large number of thinkers or theoretical perspective that has contributed to the understanding of political sociology. Thank you.
With this note, thank you, ma'am. Thank you so very much for giving us this productive session on political sociology. Dear friends, if you have any queries or if you have any feedback, then do write to us at info.cec@nic.in. We will meet you again very soon and would be continuing our series further. Till then, take care. Goodbye. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you once again.